Because black hair symbolized misfortune, from the moment she was born, Princess Elisa was despised by everyone. She was plotted against by her younger sister, and imprisoned in the darkest dungeon. Even a full meal was a distant luxury for her. Just when everything seemed cruel enough, her father the king accused her of poisoning the little fifth princess, causing the child almost to lose her life, though she was saved in time. Meanwhile, the fifth princess revealed her malicious side. Her eyes glowed red, clearly the mastermind, but no matter how much Elisa explained, no one believed her. She was taken to the execution grounds after enduring the most brutal punishments. Finally, the blade fell, and Elisa's tragic life ended. Everything turned to darkness until Elisa felt warmth returning to her body. It turned out she had been reincarnated as the young princess in the Elmer Empire with the new identity of Aisha, in the empire that had been an enemy to her in her previous life. Her father, the Light King, brought prosperity to the Elmer Empire. When Aisha was born, he pardoned prisoners and distributed food to the poor. Her mother, the beautiful queen, was gentle and incredibly talented. And the handsome boy radiating warmth was Aisha's older brother. Since she was born, he had been inseparable from her, always staying by her side. Despite the love and attention she received from this new family, the memories of her previous life still haunted her painfully. Back then, before her execution, the fifth princess had come to the prison. Elisa had hoped she would clear her name, but instead, she only came to mock her, relishing in Elisa's misery. It turned out Marianne was the child of a maid, but because of her golden eyes and white hair, she was still acknowledged as a royal and brought into the palace. Although Elisa had loved her sister deeply, Marianne greedily sought to take the coveted princess title for herself. Elisa tried to explain, but neither her parents nor brothers listened. They turned their backs on her, criticizing her, and leaving her traumatized. That's why the current words of love and affection only made her more fearful. She dreaded the day when they might abandon her again, just as before. Yet, despite everything, her brother Isis smiled gently at her. "You are our princess, so we will protect you forever," he said. Time flew by, and soon Aisha was a beautiful 1-year-old, but of course, every star attracted its share of gossip. The servants began to whisper about how she still hadn't spoken yet. Even though Aisha knew they didn't mean any harm, she wished she could at least utter simple words like "mom" or "dad." Seeing her fear, small sparks of light appeared instantly to comfort her. In this life, Aisha had a unique ability. She had become a soul sorceress. This was a rare gift, allowing her to share her worries and sorrow with the spirits. The reason she hadn't spoken yet, even at the age of 1, was due to the fear lingering from her memories of her previous life. Even when she had cried out, begging her family for help, they had ignored her and refused to believe her. While lost in these thoughts, Aisha was suddenly lifted into her mother's arms. Rather than rushing her, the queen was extremely gentle, willing to wait patiently for her daughter to call her mother, no matter how long it took. Just then, the king entered the room. Facing his precious daughter, he carefully patted her head with great tenderness. When the queen reminded him to hold their daughter, he stiffened, refusing out of fear that his rough hands might hurt her. Aisha couldn't help but feel exasperated. After all, she was just a child, not fragile glass that would shatter at the slightest touch. After receiving an encouraging look from the queen, the king finally decided to pick up his little daughter. Being held by her father for the first time since birth, Aisha was extremely surprised and then blushed uncontrollably. When they mentioned her upcoming birthday party, which would be held in just a month, she became so nervous that her whole body froze. The queen and the servants pouring tea behind her were also stunned, spilling tea as they overheard the announcement. What on earth did he just say, she thought. Just hearing about organizing a month-long banquet for feasting and drinking made the queen dizzy. As for Aisha, she too felt incredibly confused, knowing for sure that this would tire out all the servants. She was further speechless by her mother's sudden change in attitude, now sparkling with joy. But when the queen heard that she could invite her parents, her mood brightened, and she became radiant with gratitude. The queen came from a marquis family in a distant land, so it was very difficult for her to reunite with her family. Thanks to this month-long banquet, it meant she could spend more time with them, a stark contrast to Aisha's family in her past life. Because of her black hair, her biological mother had abandoned her. Even her biological father only cared about his illegitimate child, Marianne. Just thinking about it made her feel deeply uncomfortable. Seeing this, the queen grew worried and hugged her tightly. Looking into the gentle eyes of her loving mother, Aisha felt comforted and relaxed, eventually drifting off to sleep as her mother softly sang her a lullaby. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in her bedroom, but the surroundings were dim. Since she didn't like the dark, Aisha summoned her little friends to play with her. Small golden lights instantly appeared around her. But before long, they started to leave one by one. The balcony door suddenly flew open. A young man with a very striking appearance appeared from outside. Seeing the stranger intruding into her room, they just stared at each other with wide eyes. Only when Aisha realized that this person had noticed her ability to see spirits did she start to panic, unsure whether to cover his mouth or scream for help. To make matters worse, his beauty further captivated her. As he got closer, the little lights transformed into spirits and bowed before their king. Only then did Aisha realize this man wasn't ordinary. He was someone powerful, not easily dealt with. Seeing that the little girl was trembling from his teasing, the king gently touched her forehead to erase the memory of their encounter. When she tried to resist, her small body couldn't handle it, and she fell fast asleep, snoring lightly. The next morning, the maid woke her up. Aisha no longer remembered anything from the night before, and the incident slipped into oblivion. Her most pressing concern now was putting all her effort into standing with her little bottom in the air. It wasn't that she was trying to perform a hip-hop headstand, she was just wobbling her way toward the queen, with the help of 2 servants. Yet even such a simple step felt incredibly heavy for her tiny body. As she tried her best, she saw the queen smiling, arms outstretched, waiting for her. A memory suddenly flooded back, a memory of her black-haired mother, from whom she had inherited her hair. Yet that woman had always looked at her with deep hatred, even though she had borne her in pain. It was only during public events that her mother put on a fake smile and held her close, playing the part of a loving mother. Even though Aisha had known the love wasn't real, she had still felt happy in the warmth of her mother's embrace. Remembering this, Aisha bit her lip in determination, taking each step resolutely toward the cheering servants and the awaiting queen. Just a few steps away, she tripped on the carpet and fell with a thud, causing the servants to panic. If anything happened to the princess, their heads wouldn't be spared. But they were even more astonished when Aisha, with her face planted on the ground, didn't give up. She was trying to get up again. With a final effort, Aisha managed to walk on her own 2 feet, without anyone's help. Her goal was to reach the queen's warm, welcoming arms. The Marquis and Marchioness, the queen's parents, arrived. Upon seeing them, the queen was overjoyed and hugged them both like a child. They, too, turned their attention to their little granddaughter, who was a spitting image of their daughter when she was young. Seeing the queen in such a happy and lively mood, Aisha couldn't help but be amazed. No matter who they are, before their parents, children always remain children. On their way to the palace, the Marquis had received important news from Inderberg. Following the agreement between the 2 kingdoms, they decided to send an envoy with gifts to celebrate Aisha's birthday. This news made Aisha freeze in place. Just the thought of the royal family arriving made her so scared that she clung tightly to the ball in her hands. As her anxiety built, Aisha couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears, shocking everyone since she rarely cried. It turned out the Marquis had spoken too loudly, startling his granddaughter, and the Marchioness gave him a blow that nearly knocked him out. He quickly blamed Inderberg for making Aisha cry. What surprised everyone even more was that Aisha nodded in agreement, confirming her dislike for them. Once the 2 had left the room, Aisha, still pouting, was doted on by the queen, who tried everything to cheer her up. This made Aisha feel guilty for being so moody. Just then, the king and Isis arrived to visit mother and daughter. As soon as he entered, Isis rushed over to help Aisha take a few more steps, proudly wearing the expression of a big brother. Hearing the words "big brother" made Aisha pause. But Isis immediately picked her up and whispered that he had prepared a birthday present for his little sister. Seeing the happy look on his face as their foreheads touched, Aisha couldn't help but feel excited, though she still pretended to play it cool and show a bit of anticipation for the gift. Time flew by, and finally, the day of her birthday celebration began. Aisha and the queen were both incredibly beautiful and radiant, dressed in identical gowns like 2 statues cast from the same mold. Everything had been meticulously prepared, including a crown encrusted with diamonds, made lighter by magic. Not only was the celebration held in the palace, but the entire city was also festively decorated to celebrate her birthday. This caused Aisha's small cheeks to blush. It was the first time she had felt so warmly welcomed. Soon enough, Isis appeared in a grand outfit, looking like such a handsome young man that many ladies were willing to wait for him to grow older. But before he could stay cool for 3 seconds, Isis revealed his obsession with his little sister, fussing and fawning over her. The party began, accompanied by all sorts of musical instruments, with nobles from all over present. Aisha, waiting outside, was extremely nervous. Thankfully, Isis comforted her, reminding her to smile brightly since she was the main character today. The 3 of them had just entered the hall. The emperor immediately arrived to join them and then took the lead to announce to all the guests his firstborn daughter, Aisha. Amid the cheers of the crowd, they began discussing how adorable the princess was. Upon seeing her, the young women were mesmerized by her angelic appearance. Moreover, she was nestled in Isis' arms, causing the young maidens to scream like crazed fans. However, the scene of brother and sister was interrupted by their golden-haired father, who snatched his precious little girl from her brother's arms. Seeing the emperor fighting with his son for her made Aisha speechless. Earlier, he had acted so aloof, as if he didn't dare hold her. The first ritual of the celebration began, the pouring of holy water from the temple to bless Aisha with more spiritual companions. The nobles lined up to present birthday gifts. Upon seeing her breathtaking beauty, many of them were utterly enchanted. Just when the event seemed to be growing dull enough to put her to sleep, a loud announcement rang out: the emissary from the Inderberg Empire had arrived with a gift. This caused Aisha's ears to ring, and her world started spinning. Her face grew paler and paler as she saw a pair of blue eyes. She feared it could be the crown prince, but when that person removed his cloak, Aisha couldn't hold back her tears. While the kingdom of Elmer was known for its knights, Inderberg was the kingdom of mages. The person before her was not the older brother who had abandoned her, but Arsène, the son of a duke. He was also Aisha's dearest friend, with whom she had grown up. She had lost 2 years, meaning Arsène was now 19. Seeing the little girl suddenly cry made both of them extremely flustered. Even the young boy standing beside them didn't understand what was going on. Arsène immediately remembered his duty and knelt, offering a magical stone that could protect its owner. After watching her old friend leave, Aisha felt relieved that he was still alive. The final part of the gift-giving ceremony was next. Isis took the stage, holding a sword, and approached Aisha, taking her tiny hands and placing a kiss on them, wishing her a happy birthday. This seemingly simple action didn't go unnoticed. The father immediately realized it was a knightly oath, a pledge to become Aisha's sworn protector. A knight's vow is an oath of absolute loyalty and protection. Instead of feeling happy, Aisha burst into tears because she feared the hope that could lead to disappointment and betrayal. Seeing his sister's strong protest, even though she didn't say it out loud, Isis silently understood. He held her hand, looking at her with gentle eyes, and promised that he would protect her and grow even stronger. The warmth of those trustworthy hands touched her deeply, making it impossible to refuse. The emperor swiftly withdrew the sword, performing the ceremony on Aisha's behalf, as she was still too young. Isis cooperated perfectly. After the vow was completed, in front of the cheering guests, Aisha began to feel moved by the warmth of her parents and the joy on her brother's face. She started to hope for a better life in this new world. The boy eagerly volunteered to take Aisha to watch the fireworks before escorting her to her bedroom, his eyes sparkling with pride. After getting permission, the two siblings finally found a private spot to enjoy the view. Isis couldn't stop talking, chattering on and on about how beautiful the fireworks were. He even boasted about how their father had worked hard to ensure Aisha wouldn't have to endure any loud noises by having silent fireworks crafted by the court mages. The fireworks display finally began, grand and breathtaking, leaving both of them speechless with awe. Seeing all the things prepared for her and the joy on Aisha's face made Aisha's heart warm. At this very moment, Aisha's little heart was moved, and she couldn't help but want to speak up. She seized the opportunity when the fireworks went off with a loud bang and called out, "Isis." As soon as she finished saying his name, Aisha felt embarrassed and secretly glanced at him to see his reaction, but she was shocked beyond belief. She hadn't expected Isis to burst into tears. The young boy, just having heard his name, was so overjoyed that he cried uncontrollably and urged Aisha to keep calling him. Her parents quickly came over and, seeing Isis in such a flustered state without any explanation, made the queen feel utterly confused. But when the little girl called her Mama, the queen finally understood and was deeply moved. The father also hurried over, eager for his turn. Seeing him like that, Aisha couldn't help but give him a papa, and she was immediately lifted into his arms. Not only were they happy, but Aisha was also so overjoyed that she shed tears, feeling like she had truly found a loving family. Seeing them reunited, Arsène, recalling the image of his siblings in Inderberg, became so angry that he furrowed his brows. His master, who knew exactly what he was thinking, kicked him in the stomach. Arsène must have been thinking about how, while this family was happy, his own royal family was like a circus. He quickly stopped his master, as disrespecting the royal family was a serious offense. Although he said those words, Arsène clenched his fists to control his anger, remembering her death. When he first received the news, he was so shocked that he fainted on the spot. When he regained consciousness, he vaguely saw the familiar image of his dear friend, Elisa, smiling radiantly. Just thinking about it made him unable to hold back his tears, and he swore he would never forgive those responsible. Determined to wipe away his tears, he resolved to uncover the truth behind her death and bring it to light. His master, instead of stopping him, supported Arsène, which made him extremely happy. After looking back at where Aisha had been, he silently thanked her, feeling as though he had regained the strength to move forward. Time flew by, and 6 years passed in the blink of an eye. Aisha, now 7, was dozing under a tree when she was suddenly woken up and greeted Isis with a radiant smile. He appeared from behind the tree, looking much more mature than before. Seeing her reading ancient texts made him curious, wondering if all 7-year-olds were now reading such things. Looking back at the past, after gaining trust in this family at the age of 3, Aisha began to display her talents. Not only could she read fluently like a rapper, but she also drove Isis crazy with excitement as he ran off to the queen to boast about her achievements. On a piece of paper, neatly written by Aisha, were the words Papa and Mama, which moved the queen to tears. Thanks to this, Aisha was permitted to visit the library, where she learned a great deal and discovered some books on spiritual summoning magic. However, this made her realize that being a genius might cause jealousy among the other heirs. But aside from being a total siscon, Isis posed no real threat for her to be on guard against. He may have grown up and looked more mature, but his adoring eyes hadn't changed at all. Even his puppy-like expression of disappointment whenever Aisha read something faster than he could keep up with was still the same. During this time, Aisha also gathered information about the kingdom of Inderberg. Marianne had become a saint, and the crown prince was on the verge of becoming the heir apparent. Seeing Aisha's sudden sadness, the spirits quickly consoled her, knowing that this was the key to her revenge on them. However, despite all these years, Aisha still couldn't understand how Marianne's eyes had turned red. The sight of his 6-year-old sister deep in thought made Isis doubt his entire existence, as it seemed like she had matured beyond him. Startled, Aisha quickly tried to make excuses and change the subject to avoid suspicion. But Isis, not wanting to press her further, only wished she would open up to him if she ever had difficulties. When they returned to the palace, Aisha noticed that the maids were bustling about, cleaning as if preparing to welcome a distinguished guest. It turned out that the queen had come looking for her, and they were hurrying to prepare for her arrival. In the Elmer Empire, each season has its festival to express gratitude to the gods. Lately, the queen has been very busy with preparations. It had only been 3 days since Aisha last saw her mother, but it was enough to make her incredibly happy when they reunited. The two sat down and had tea together like true friends. The queen brought up the matter of the scholar from the Imperial Academy from the previous time. Aisha quickly searched her memory and remembered that he was a serious man who taught dull lessons. She thought she was going to be scolded, but to her surprise, the queen was extremely excited because her daughter had received endless praise. Seeing her daughter act older than her great-grandmother, the queen finally decided to ask Aisha what she wanted to do in the future. Having such a talented and exceptional daughter made her mother feel an equal amount of pressure. However, the queen decided that no matter what her daughter wanted to do, she would fully support her. Noticing that Aisha didn't seem to have any clear plans yet, the queen suggested that Aisha could play with friends her age instead of burying herself in books all the time. Feeling understood and supported, Aisha smiled with great happiness. Returning to her room, Aisha recalled how both her mother and her brother always supported her. She then remembered her goal of revenge, deciding not to put pressure on her family and face the battle on her own. To prepare for her plan to subdue them, Aisha continued her diligent visits to the royal library to search for books on spiritual summoning magic. Even though she could understand the writing, her small mouth mispronounced the words, making her die a little inside. She noticed a stool nearby and climbed onto it to get a better view and make searching easier. Just when she thought she would give up after finding no clues, she stumbled upon a treasure right in front of her eyes, the history of spirits. As soon as she held the book, Aisha felt a wave of joy, like winning a beauty contest. It was as if, upon holding the book, spirits appeared and started communicating with her. Suddenly, voices were calling her name. When she glanced over, they were inviting her to choose them and read their book. The cover looked ordinary and unrelated to what she needed, but since the spirit seemed to want her to, Aisha agreed. As she was being escorted back to her room by a guard, Isis appeared. As soon as she saw her brother, Aisha quickly hid the books behind her, but she couldn't fool him. Aisha hurriedly explained that it was just an old book she wanted to study to gain more knowledge. Seeing his little sister trying to hide something, Isis smiled awkwardly but didn't ask further. Instead, he patted her head. He reassured Aisha by repeating what he had always said, that he would support her no matter what. Watching Isis walk away, Aisha had the feeling that her brother already knew she was hiding something. But who would believe her if she told them she had died, been reincarnated, and remembered things from her past life? She returned to examine the book she had just found, unable to contain her excitement. Aisha let out a joyful cheer. The book on history was fascinating. The rarity of spirit summoners was due to them being caught up in battles with spirits. Learning about the history of those who couldn't see spirits at birth left Aisha questioning her own identity. Her attention was quickly drawn to a page that mentioned a method of summoning spirits. This intrigued her greatly. The requirements included mana and spirits, with the most important element being a contract. What Aisha didn't expect was that this book was just an introduction, forcing readers to buy another book to get the contract details. This made her so furious she nearly spat fire. The spirits beside her quickly calmed her down. Thanks to them, she noticed the unnamed, untitled book she had seen earlier. Inside it, she found the contract for summoning low-level spirits. She immediately grabbed a blank sheet of paper, drew a circle, placed her hand on it, and recited the incantation. Instantly, a bright light emerged, and before long, a figure began to form. As soon as Aisha heard the voice of the spirit, she realized that it was the child who was always by her side encouraging her and had pointed out the book earlier. She was so overjoyed that she smiled, and the spirit kissed her, signifying the contract between them. The spirit was Ru, a low-level light spirit. When a spirit forms a contract with a human, it is granted a physical form and no longer remains a mere glowing dot. Seeing the friend who had always been by her side now flying around in front of her in physical form, Aisha was overwhelmed with joy. Of course, forming a contract with a spirit isn't normally as easy as it was for Aisha, but her extraordinary abilities from birth made it possible. Even though Ru had been with her since childhood, they had never spoken before. This was because uncontracted low-level spirits could only babble like babies. After a formal introduction, Ru began boasting about having such a famous master, and in his excitement, accidentally mentioned the Spirit King. Although Ru quickly tried to stop itself, Aisha's curiosity was piqued, and she stared at the little spirit with sparkling eyes. Under the pressure of her gaze, Ru had no choice but to reveal the truth. Aisha was the only person in the world with the unique ability to see spirits without forming a contract. This made Aisha so excited that she grabbed Ru, who was now regretting letting its mouth run faster than its brain. Aisha then bombarded Ru with questions about summoning higher-level spirits. Ru provided her with additional knowledge. All spirits have a similar summoning process. You could say that fusion power is like a container, and mana is the water contained within it. The larger the container, the more mana it can accumulate, allowing for the summoning of higher-level spirits. Since Aisha's small body couldn't contain much more, Ru, who was busy explaining basic knowledge about spirits, became distracted by the plate of cookies on the table. However, not forgetting its mission, it continued rambling about other light spirits. When Aisha heard the mention of the Spirit King, she realized it was referring to the god of light, Luminous. As the god of victory and glory who bestowed blessings upon the people, the upcoming festival was dedicated to him. Of course, this was merely the name humans gave him. In reality, the god of light was the one who created various spirit kings. Thus, the light spirit king was not a god but was often mistaken for one. Upon realizing that the revered god was merely a spirit, Aisha had an idea that made her scream so loudly that it caused Ru, who was drinking tea, to be drenched. Ever since Aisha gleefully brought her plan for the spring festival, the skies had done nothing but pouring rain. With Ru's help, who had extensive knowledge about the Spirit King, she wrote up a plan. Once it was approved and praised by her parents, it was set into motion. Seeing Ru so happy, Aisha once again asked about the Spirit King, triggering her fangirl mode. She eagerly recounted how amazing he was, her eyes sparkling with admiration. When she mentioned his platinum hair and golden eyes, she felt as though she had seen him before, but immediately dismissed the thought. How could an ordinary person like her have met the king of the spirits? Yet, Aisha still had a dream, a desire to one day summon their king. Ru quickly shot down that fantasy. Even in her wildest dreams, it wasn't possible. Not just Aisha, but every summoner in the world could not do so. Human mana simply wasn't sufficient. Hearing that, Aisha became despondent but knew her limitations. She remembered being imprisoned in the dark dungeon, which made her love light all the more. And the one who first brought light into her world was Isis, whom she suddenly wished to see after not having seen him for days. The nanny, despite promising to keep Isis' illness a secret, accidentally blurted it all out after Aisha's usual whining tactics. The reason for his seclusion was that he feared passing his sickness to her after getting drenched in rain while practicing swordsmanship. Knowing that everyone else was aware of her brother's illness while she remained clueless, Aisha finally understood how Isis must have felt, always keeping secrets from her. But instead of feeling down, she quickly grabbed a pen to write him a heartfelt letter, while at the same time, Isis was coughing uncontrollably. He had come to realize his mistake of practicing swordsmanship in the rain. With a servant by his side tending to him, Isis couldn't help but be annoyed, especially since it wasn't anyone important coming to visit, but just this guy. The man never missed an opportunity to tease and mock Prince Isis. As the two were bickering like cats and dogs, someone came to deliver the news. Though he wasn't in the mood to meet anyone, upon hearing it was a maid from the princess's palace, Isis immediately prepared himself, causing Vian to look at him rather amused. When the maid handed over the letter Aisha had sent, Isis' feverish mind brightened, startling the two people beside him. Upon receiving the letter, Isis' face lit up with happiness. However, after reading only the first line, his excitement caused his fever to spike even higher, making him unsteady. After sending his attendants away to preserve his dignity, he finally read the heartfelt words his beloved little sister had written to him. In the letter, she expressed her adorable concerns and wished him a speedy recovery in time for the spring festival. This only strengthened Isis' resolve to become stronger and protect his little sister. Though he knew Aisha was hiding something, a brother as doting as him would give his all for her smile. With his heart burning with determination, he paid no attention to Vian's snide remarks. He ordered his servants to prepare paper and ink so he could quickly write a reply. Witnessing this side of Isis, Vian couldn't help but be amazed. As an only child, he didn't understand the bond between siblings like they shared. He recalled the time when Isis' mother had passed away. Back then, Vian had seen him so small and fragile, like a lost animal. Yet now, Isis was full of light, all thanks to Aisha. After days of relentless rain, the skies finally cleared. Aisha was overjoyed to have sent her letter, and when she saw the rainbow in the sky, she recalled the time she and her brother were on a boat together, gazing at the lake, and discussing the meanings behind their names. Isis, after all, was the name given to a rainbow after the rain. The spring festival began. A priest used his light powers to heal a wound in a man's eye. The injury vanished without a trace, as if by magic. Aisha didn't participate, she stood from above, observing everything. Previously, Ru had mentioned that the Spirit King wasn't a god, yet now the priest seemed to be using his powers. Light spirits held ancient power, and the priest believed in and preached about him, so he was able to wield a portion of that power. This meant that the priest could use divine-like powers, but only within the temple's limits. That also meant Aisha could use healing powers too, which astonished her. But of course, she couldn't do anything as miraculous as what the priest had done, nor did she need to become a lifelong devotee. As a spirit summoner, Aisha could also use such powers, but it was best to keep this a secret. Thinking of how summoning higher-level spirits would make her power even greater sent shivers down her spine. But this was a secret Aisha would keep to herself, it would become her greatest weapon. Once again, Aisha found herself stuck amidst a crowd of young ladies. Many nobles were chatting and laughing, but only she was drowning in her misery. During the serious ceremony earlier, she hadn't had a chance to speak with her brother. Sneaking a glance, she saw that Isis was still in good health, which made her breathe a sigh of relief. Next to him stood Vian, a nobleman famed for his exceptional swordsmanship and magic. Lost in thought, Aisha's reverie was shattered by the endless prattling of the girl next to her. The constant chatter had exhausted the other ladies present. Just as Aisha wished for someone to rescue her, Vian appeared like a prince on a white horse, requesting to speak with her privately. Vian then used the excuse that Isis wanted to see her, and so he took the liberty of interrupting. This allowed Aisha to successfully escape from the noisy crowd. She let out a sigh of relief, unable to hide the bored, annoyed expression on her face. Vian then admitted that Isis had never actually asked him to do this, which left her stunned. She hadn't expected someone who seemed so indifferent to care about her troubles. Ignoring the previous matter, Aisha's attention was drawn to the fresh flower pinned to Vian's chest. It was Aisha's idea to decorate the entire festival with fresh flowers, to feel closer to the spirits. This was quite a nice touch because people usually forget about the existence of those beings since they can't see them. Seeing Aisha looking so mature, Vian couldn't help but be amazed, just as Isis had said. She was indeed an old soul in a young body. This was a rare chance for Vian to talk to Aisha. At first, she didn't understand why, but when Isis appeared and immediately shoved him aside, invisibly wedging himself between the two, she finally understood. After many days, the two siblings finally opened up to each other. When Aisha mentioned the letter she had written, Isis blushed bright red. His shy demeanor delighted Aisha immensely. "I truly have the cutest brother ever," she thought. As they held hands, sharing a warm moment, the queen and her grandparents arrived. Aisha suddenly became their tour guide, showing them all around the palace. Thanks to the queen's suggestion to take her grandparents for a walk, she had the chance to bond with them more. Of course, Vian was also present, because he admired the marquis and his renowned knights. Upon seeing a sparkling flower garden, her grandfather told Aisha to go inside, then muttered something like a spell. The branches gently swayed just as Aisha reached out to catch the petals, her face glowing with a beautiful expression as she looked up to see everyone watching her. Her grandfather, holding a crystal orb in his hand, had used it earlier to take a selfie of his granddaughter. The image orb was a new product recently released by mages. It could store not only images but also movement and sound. As it activated, everyone saw Aisha's earlier movements and expressions. Embarrassed by how she looked, Aisha quickly stopped it. Seeing such a useful item, Isis immediately begged the Marquis to give it to him. Of course, the Marquis, a grandfather who loved his granddaughter dearly, did not easily give it up, saying that he would bring it home to admire later. The childish scene made Vian burst out laughing. Being an only child, this was the first time he witnessed such sibling affection. Hearing about how much Isis cared for his sister made Vian envious. Aisha felt incredibly happy. The next day was the most important one of the festival. Isis, as the heir, would ascend the altar to pray for blessings. Aisha, eager to spend some time with him, quickly went to find him but was surprised to see Vian was already there. When she spotted Isis standing before the portrait of their late mother, she froze. He still wished she were alive to witness the person he had grown into. Sensing Aisha's concern, Isis immediately patted her head and reassured her that he was truly happy with their family now. The three of them went to the garden for afternoon tea, chatting about many topics. Aisha was delighted with the vibrant color of the tea, clearer than the one from her palace, but she couldn't help noticing that the servant seemed unfamiliar. After taking a sip, she realized the tea didn't taste as good as expected, it was quite bitter. Thinking it was just brewed incorrectly, Zhu quickly stopped her from drinking anymore, saying the tea was poisoned. It was already too late, Aisha's vision blurred, and when she glanced at Isis, his face had turned pale. Moments later, she coughed up blood, feeling heavy and weak. As her vision darkened, she saw Isis reaching out his hand toward her. Both siblings collapsed as the others panicked around them. Will they survive this ordeal? Stay tuned for the next part. Peace.